So as usual, the first thing we want to do is initialize a basic patch by going to global, scrolling down to 34 and hitting right now. So we're going to be attempting to make two kinds of pluck sounds, the polyphonic one and a monophonic one. Pro 2 is a paraphonic synth, so if we choose a polyphonic route, we're going to be restricted to only one oscillator. Pluck sounds are pretty simple. It's largely to do with the shape of the envelope and the tone of the sound. So we want a quick attack, no sustain, and a short decay. So let's get started with the polyphonic variety, or paraphonic in this case. So I'm going to go to miscellaneous properties and choose paraphonic. By default, only the first oscillator is enabled. So I'm going to hold down so I can edit all of them. I'm going to choose sawtooth for all of them. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up the level to 100 for all 4 oscillators. So now we have a basic 4-note synth where each oscillator corresponds to one of the notes. So let's move on for the amplitude envelope. I'm going to set a low attack, low sustain, low release for now, and then we're just going to tweak the decay till we get something plucky. That sounds pretty good. We can bring up the release a little bit. Next what we're going to do is lower the filter cutoff of the first filter. And then we're going to use the filter envelope to have a similar shape to the amp envelope. We're going to bring up the envelope amount in positive direction. Again, low attack, low sustain, and then a bit of decay and release. Now it's just a matter of tweaking the knobs until you find a sweet spot and a sound you like. You mainly want to massage the cutoff, the envelope amount, and the decay and release times. We can also bring up a little bit of the sub-octave to add a bit of bottom end. So generally we want a mellow sound for pluck sounds. And the way we're doing that now is we're picking an oscillator which is very rich in harmonics, and then we're making it mellow by removing harmonics with the low pass filter. But alternatively, you can pick an oscillator which has a low amount of harmonics, and then you don't need the filter as much. Another thing that I find really useful for pluck sounds is to add some delay effects. The cool thing about the BBD delay here is that you can set it has its own high pass and low pass filter for the feedback chain. So we can decrease the cutoff frequency of the delay feedback line so that the delayed notes will be more mellow. We can also engage another delay. To make it a little more interesting, we can add some shape mod modulation with one of the LFOs. Another interesting thing we can do is engage the sequencer to modulate some of the parameters. So what I've done here is in the sequencer menu, I've set the play mode to step and the play source to key. So now the sequencer will advance every time I press a key. In track 2 of the sequencer, I have a 4-note pattern which is modulating the decay time of the filter envelope And in track 3, I have an 8-note pattern step. And that one is modulating the shape mod for all 4 oscillators. So this is what we have. So this adds some variation because each time you play a note, you get a slightly different sound. So that's it for the paraphonic version. We're slightly limited in this case because we only have one oscillator. So let's move on to the monophonic pluck sound, where we'll have access to all 4 oscillators. So again, let's reinitialize the patch by going to global 34, hitting right now. So for the monophonic version, we're going to follow basically the same steps, except now we're going to have a little more variation to play with here. One thing to note about pluck sounds is that you want a really aggressive attack, almost like a percussive, plucky attack. So there's 2 ways to achieve that. Either we can have a short noise burst at the beginning, or we can pitch modulate one of the oscillators to start off really high and then go down low. It's a similar trick we used for the bass drum and other percussion. And of course, we want to start with an envelope with a really fast attack. So let's get started with that. Right off the bat, let's make the amp envelope have a fast attack, no sustain, and then we'll play with decay and release. And we can engage the filter. Again, positive amp envelope, no attack, no sustain, bit of decay and bit of release. So in order to get the noise burst at the beginning, we have to rely on a little trick. Because if I put the noise source on oscillator 2 right now, and I turn it up, a lot of it gets filtered out by the filter here. So one way to get around that is to use this oscillator split function here, which will route the first 2 oscillators to the first filter and the second 2 oscillators to the second filter. So we're going to gauge that, and you can see in this graph 1 and 2 are going to this one and 3 and 4 are going to this one. And the trick is I'm going to put my noise in oscillator 3, which will be routed through the second filter, and I'm going to open that filter all the way up. That way the noise will go through, but the filter will still filter the first 2 oscillators, which are going to be my melodic oscillators. So I'm going to turn off the noise from oscillator 2 and go to 3 and then put the noise there. Now you can hear that my plucked sound is being filtered here, but my noise is going straight through. So now the trick is I want to make the noise amount all the way down. I'm going to rely on one of the auxiliary envelopes to bring it up. So I'm going to use envelope 4 and set the destination to oscillator 3 level, which is my noise. And for now, I'm just going to crank it all the way up so I can tweak the shape. So you can hear we're almost back to our snare drum sound. And that has a little bit of click at the beginning, which creates an illusion of a fast attack. And the key here is to be really subtle, so you don't want to make it sound like a burst of noise going around. So you can bring the amount all the way down. The way I like to treat it is bring it down until you can't hear it anymore, and then just nudge it back up. So you can barely hear it, but it still has the effect. And the cool thing about this oscillator split is now I can play with the filter of my sound independent of my noise source. And again, let's bring up the sub-octave oscillator just a little bit. And let's bring in another oscillator. Let's start it off at sawtooth as well. And to add a little more percussiveness, we can modulate the pitch over oscillators in a really quick fashion, so it starts off really high and then immediately goes down low. So you're not going to hear that pitch change, but that huge flux in pitch will create a clicking sound, which will add to our attack sound. So in envelope 5, I'm going to pick the frequency of all 4 oscillators. And this will include the noise source, but the frequency is irrelevant for noise, so that doesn't matter. Again, crank the amount up and tweak the envelope. So that's the exaggerated effect. And you want to tweak it down until you can't perceive the change in pitch. And bring the amount down a little bit. And again, I find pluck sounds sound much better with delay. So let's bring up the BBD here. This time we can choose 2 independent wave shapes because we have more than 1 oscillator available. Let's bring the second oscillator up an octave. And again, we can modulate the wave shape with the LFO. So I've turned on syncing for the delays because I'm going to turn on the sequencer now and record a little pattern.